Welcome to episode 2 of In the Zone. We obviously have a special guest. We got a lot of topics that we're going to hit today. Man, we're going to talk election results. We're going to talk about some youth football. We're going to talk about the People's Choice Awards in Cincinnati. But anything else, and of course, we have a special guest host today.
Hello.
Power on. Bluetooth connected.
We're going to start off. I appreciate that, though. We're going to start off, obviously, this week, it was Black Panther Week, so we always start off with a little intro song. So I'm going to play and start by Rihanna. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Wonderful movie. I suggest you go check it out. I'm not going to give any spoilers because my co-host has not seen it yet. But what I tell everybody and how I continue to hit it on my perspective is, I love just seeing beautiful black women fight fish. I've never cried so hard watching beautiful black women fight fish. I was cool to take my daughter out and go see it. But this is Lift Me Up by Rihanna. And then, so like, a situation like this too, so like, we'll pick up some of the audio, so that way it's also, but what I'll do on the video is I'll play like her video kind of come on the background as we get everything kind of playing through on the two, so at that point while we kind of gather before this.
Lift me up.
Yeah, it is kind of like,
Hold me down.
make sure we pick it up too.
Keep me.
Why you cut me off?
No,
Did I
speaker
come
died,
out?
yeah.
Oh, I died on. It's cool. Alright, we'll get right into it. Yeah, we'll get right into it. We'll get
Who
right
did
into it.
charge the speaker?
Yeah, it's all good, man. So now, welcome. Like we said, we're in the zone. My man Will cannot be with us today. He's not feeling too well, man. It was Young Cash's birthday, so we do want to shout out Young Cash's son. He wasn't feeling well and passing on to dad. So my partner in crime, Will, love you, man. Prayers up to you and your fam. Get you some garden food so you can feel a lot better. But yeah, I do have our wonderful co-host. I'll let her introduce herself at her level platform.
Okay.
So yes, ma'am.
All right, so my name is Te'Airea Powell. Right now I am the creator of Cincy T, Instagram and TikTok, CINCY__TEA. Right now what I'm doing is I am a trustee on the west side in East Westwood. A lot of the things that you're seeing out here in Lincoln Heights with the Heights movement we're doing in East Westwood as well. We have a rec center, we have a community garden and basketball court. So we're just trying to do our part to lift up the people in East Westwood.
Yeah, because things like this and why it's so important, whether it's East Westwood, whether it's Lincoln Heights, the more that we can realize we save ourselves. Shout out to the Center for Closing the Health Gap and Renee for the We Must Save Us, because I feel like if I said that and she didn't get a shout out, I would get very upset. But really though, that idea that we're the ones that are in charge, we're the ones that's in power, we're the ones that's making these decisions. So it's a certain responsibility that comes into empowering residents, empowering the next generation, and showing them the way to make what we're doing a little bit more sustainable. And as we talk about sustainable change and what goes into sustainable change, we had a crazy election on Tuesday. Shout out to all the workers that were on the ground getting things done, both from a Democratic and Republican Party, Independent Party, folks that voted, just everybody that's involved in the democratic process. Just as we look through some of the notes, what were just some of your off the top first reactions, hot takes from the election this year?
I was very interested. I just want to jump in and say I was interested in the county commissioner race. You typically have the Democrats or the Republicans are the two dominators, but Smitherman as an independent, his name holds a lot of weight.
Yeah.
He has a ton of supporters. So I was kind of torn. I thought that race was going to be a little bit more interesting, but it still kind of was a landslide. I think that the Republican endorsed candidate kind of, split the vote, as everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
I thought that race was going to be a little bit more interesting, but I do think that as an independent candidate, he did hold his own in regards to the numbers. So that was one that kind of, was out there. I was also shocked by the Betsy Sunderman and Manisha Koshin race. I do not think that people thought that was going to happen. So I'm always interested, and you hear so many people talking about voting down a slate.
Yeah.
And however, all of the Democratic candidates did not win.
And I don't think you should vote down the slate. We actually talked about that in our last episode. You know, the gentleman was in your seat saying, don't be a loaded gun, right? Don't go out there and just, you know, be anybody's mascot and just come straight down it. I do appreciate, you know, those that don't, but the odd part is where folks split it down the pipe, right? You know, even, you know, we can really get into the Sunderland one because that one's a little bit oddball. But let's stick more on the Hamilton County piece. You know, once again, we are in the zone, so the Hamilton County one does hit upon a little bit of that because Stephanie Dumas was a former village manager here in the Village Liquor Heights. I didn't know you knew that one as well. But the crazy thing as you talk about the split, so it went a little bit over 130,000 votes for Stephanie Dumas, about 92,000 for Mr. O'Neill, and about 67,000 for Mr. Smitherman. So obviously, if you add it up, those two together, it was just a 2-on-2 race. That race does make it seem like that maybe Ms. Dumas does not win, but it depends on who's that candidate, though, too.
Correct.
Mr. Smitherman, you know, he does have a, what's the best word to put it, not a controversial reputation with the black community.
He has a split reputation.
That's
some people feel that he is amazing, and then some people think the complete opposite.
Which is good though, because that means that you have done a lot of work. Mm-hmm. If both sides, whether it, you know, I get nervous about folks who just everybody just loves you, everybody hates you. You know, if you kind of got split, that does say something about you as an individual. But where I personally, and this is just me speaking personally, as I look into the camera, these thoughts do not reflect those of the Heights movement and anybody else in Congress, so whatever the boys maybe need to say. But when I first met Mr. Smitherman, this is back in 2010. I'm just getting out of college, and he was just really just beating the table when he was the president of NAACP that black folks need to get involved in these contracts, right? That we need more black government contracts and getting those type of things done. And then I don't know if I felt that same energy in 2022, which I could be completely wrong. And you know, Brother Chris, man, like I said, as an individual, as a person, I would, if you want to come on the show, we could have this talk. I would love to, because you know I have nothing but respect for you, sir. But we just haven't had the chance to have this conversation in person, because I would say the same thing. But I haven't seen that same amount of energy. Last time I talked to Mr. Smith, obviously we were speaking on the gun range issue, and just kind of what his thoughts were about that. And they, you know, I thought of it a little bit more supportive. But yeah, just anything else on that before we just kind of go down the rest of the slate.
I would definitely say that I think that what you are feeling is a sentiment that I've received from a lot of people. I think that I don't have a personal relationship with him. I did have some issues of things that were done at city council, but I do think one interesting thing about him and why I think he is a candidate to watch in other races, as I've already been on Twitter, is that I think that he has proven that you do not need to be on one of the power sides. And even though he did not win this race, I think, like I said, he held his own. But I also think that he has supporters on both sides with the Republicans and Democrats. And while some people may think that as a negative, I actually think that that's a positive, because he's able to work with both sides.
No, that's important.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So I think that is one trait that I think that we need to mimic in regards to him as a candidate, is how do you get support from people on both sides, and why is that? And is it because you're working both sides? And I think that it is. So I think that's a positive about Mr. Smith.
You brought up 2 points. I definitely want to stick a nugget in that on how do we really move our positions forward from a Republican and Democratic standpoint, which is definitely important. But when you just talk about what is it that we want from our candidates, right? When you talk about, you know, I'm a young black father. I think I'm still considered young. But
I always ask myself that
They say 35. I pulled a gray hair out the other day. I was like, man, I don't know. But no, in all seriousness, no. We are now becoming those true constituents of those who, when you see about what's taking place around you, whether it's how my streets look, what our playgrounds look like, those real meat policies that really affect on a local standpoint, they're really talking to us. So now that we are that new voting bloc, it really is showed that next generation is coming out to vote. Really is what kind of turned the tide and really pelted what folks said was going to be this big red wave that was going to wash over us. What is it, some things and some standards that you feel like we need to put on the table as people of color. Let's just focus on Hamilton County. Let's focus on Hamilton County. What are some things that we want to see in Hamilton County from our elected officials coming up?
So I think that a lot of the candidates that I interviewed with Cincy T, I asked them to break down what they were running for. Yeah. I think that the first thing I think we need to do in Hamilton County as a people is we need to understand what we're voting for. We need to understand who we're voting for and why we're voting for it and how it affects us every day. So I think some of the things that we need to ask about is really nonpartisan. So I think that we need to step away from the whole Democratic, Republican, Independent thing on the local level. So I'll say that for the city and in the county, I think when you start talking about the state and federal, obviously parties matter because of the core values. But I think on a city and county, we need to get our roads fixed and things like that. Like that's not a Republican or Democratic issue. I think even regards to the courts, I know that when I interviewed Raquel, she talked about all these millions of dollars that are available in juvenile court that are supposed to help. And I appreciated her letting me know that because I think that's something that we don't know. So when we talk about diversion programs for the youth, when we talk about trying to keep them out of the courts in the first place, I think those are the kind of things that we need to focus on. And once again, I don't think those are Republican Democrat issues. That's accountability issue. So I think that we as a people need to focus on that. But
the Republicans are making it a issue. And maybe I should not be that partisan, but it seems like that one. You put issues like issue 1 on the ballot. When you put things like issue 2 on the ballot.
Let's talk about issue 1.
The Republicans seem that they're drawing a line on the table because these are Republican issues that won. And congratulations to the Conservative Party.
Even the gerrymandering, that is. Obviously, but yeah.
When you talk about the stake of our democracy and why some of these, you had a liberal side of the country really screaming on that. That's why there's no reason to rig the election in a way that you're talking about the shaping of how folks are voting and what your district looks like. If you're truly about improving the folks of America, you will want to improve all sides of it, right? Not a certain side of it. But let's get on issue 1 and issue 2 that was brought in, by the Republican side. Because as you said before, we shouldn't be, advocating for what the Republican wants or what the Democrats want. They should be coming to us.
Right.
But let's talk about from a crime perspective, especially from Raquel, how these issues move forward and how they can kind of shape what our criminal system looks like and for the next, 5 to 10, 15 years.
Yeah, so while we're moving on to that, just to harp really quick, you just said something. I think that people need to understand in regards to what gerrymandering is. Yeah. And I also think that that's a part of when people say my one vote doesn't matter or voting isn't for me, I'm not into politics. I think that you should be because it affects you either way. But I think that if it didn't matter, they would not play the gerrymandering game at all. So.
No, of course not. If your vote didn't matter, it's like anything else. If I didn't want to win the game so bad, I wouldn't sit up all day and put the cheat codes in.
They spend millions of dollars, and this is what I'm trying to get people locally, millions and millions of dollars into these races. So the vote definitely matters.
But I don't think people understand how those millions of dollars can go back into their pockets, right? Or how those $1 million are affected towards them. There is an opportunity if you want to be engaged in your community to not just be involved, but to also put some resources back in your pocket. Whether from a Republican or Democratic stance, if you feel a certain way, not only go talk to these individuals, but let them know that, hey, if you want to be a part of their campaigns, those are things that you can do to
make money.
Yeah, to make a side hustle. And it's not a bad thing. People feel like it's a bad thing to pay people to give their time to engage on issues. But I'm sorry, I'm getting off the topic a little bit. I'm getting off the topic a little bit.
All right, let's jump to issue 1.
Let's jump to issue 1. So issue 1, once again, we talked about it a little bit last week, and you're talking about bail reform here in Hamilton County. And the issue 1 won. And it's a little bit scary because now you're talking about who is responsible for committing crime. You and I both committed crime. And if I have enough resources, not only am I back on the street, which only makes things a little bit worse, but those who might be deemed harmful, you're now paying astronomical bail prices for things that somebody else that may not look like me or might have done something even worse doesn't have to pay. Just your overall first thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I was actually, and I've stated this over and over again, I was shocked that it won, and it won 75 to 25%. And so my concern, just like anybody else, is why did people vote for this? did people truly understand what this was saying, or did they just read public safety and say, yes, I want this to pass? I think that we already know, we don't even have to harp on this, pull up numbers, because we know it for a fact that there are disparities when it comes to black people, when it comes to the court system, right? So we see higher bonds, we see more incarceration. So what this does is this allows a judge to make the determination of how big of a threat you are. And what this issue kind of says is that, okay, well, Durant's can afford a $500,000 bond because his mom or his dad can go ahead and put up their house that they own because they have that equity. Yeah. But Te'Airea does not have anybody that owns a home that's even worth that much. And so she's a bigger threat to the public, which is not necessarily the case. I do think the
complete opposite, really, in most situations.
It is in most situations, and I actually think that this is where people need to understand that judges matter too. These judicial races matter, because when you talk about public safety, we have to trust that our judges are making the best decision, not based on a person's, socioeconomic status or race, but based off of what they've done and, and what's the likeliness that they'll go out and do it again. I think that we have to be very careful, and with this passing, I think that what we're going to see is a higher number of poor people being stuck in the jail, and it's going to go ahead and say that they're basically guilty until proven innocent, because the time that they have to sit in there and wait for a trial, they can lose everything that they have.
Man, you're talking about your job, everything else like that. We talk about in America, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. But now when I sit back and I'm like, man, I don't have that. I lost. How can I sit back and even go to work if I know I'm gonna go back and sue? If I can try to go back to the appeals process, we talked about it. I don't want to, kind of badger on a little bit, but it's a little scary when you think about so many individuals who may not even know or have the resources to fight back. That if I make one small decision, and luckily, some things like, why your vote's important, because, weed reform. I'm just thinking about something of that nature. I've seen it plenty of times. Folks get pulled over for the most silliest things. You sit behind bars, you see that judge might say, hey, you might have something else that's a record on your offense, and then they kind of sit there and just say before, run the checkup on you and have you sitting behind bars.
I think and for this issue, the only people that are going to benefit from issue one are the bail bondsmen. If I was a bail bondsman right now, I would be like cha-ching, because those are the people who really got to eat off of this, because they'll be able to get that $5,000.
I mean, not only just them. I mean, we'll talk about some of our elected officials who might also benefit from that as well. Okay. But yeah, let's talk about some positive news. When we talk about real transformational change from a Hamilton County standpoint, Mr. Greg Lansman. Shout out to Brother Greg. Now shout out to Brother No, and that whole team. You guys are in a heck of a race.
I was gonna say, because he has a really good team that makes him look well.
Yes,
and he's a good person. Yeah. But I think your team really can make or break you, and he has some amazing people that work under him.
And once again, it's all about the ground game, and how do you now speak to a lot of different people, a lot of different individuals, but also be your authentic self and keep your authentic platform pushing forward. So shout out to them and beating out Mr. Steve Shabbat. We joked about Mr. Shabbat, being a lifetime member of Congress last week, but just like any other public servant, thank you for your service, sir. And I always agreed on policy, but politics is a dirty, ugly game. And at the end of the day, you did give your time and was a public servant. So
that's really big of you, Durant.
Because as an elected official, though, I just feel like, though, whether you are a Republican or Democrat, it's still, you understand what type of game you're getting into, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not always fair. You have a family. You're still a person.
And they fall into
You're still people. Like, we're still people, and that's the part that we get out of it sometimes, that we see these people who are quote-unquote elected officials or on quote-unquote roles as bigger than themselves, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that they're not touchable. Like that their families may not be able to get affected by the fact that they're spending someone's time trying to, represent somebody. It may not be what we want them to represent, but they're still representing somebody. Yeah. So, all the elected officials that's out there, I appreciate you. I respect you. I may not agree with you. And I may not
have voted for you.
Yeah. But respect is there though. Respect is there. Though.
Running the campaign is hard.
Yeah. So shout out to Greg. It's amazing work that you're doing. And like I said, you said this team is amazing, and they allow spaces where Greg was able to present his platform. And what we want to talk about, we kind of talked about in our pre-meeting room, how we create platforms or we create spaces where politics and politicians are able to now come into these forums and be able to be more tangible, right? Like, so that way, if you do see someone like a Steve Shattuck or you do see someone like a Greg, you don't feel like they're this godly-like figure, but they are somebody within your community who's supposed to represent you, that you're supposed to talk to and touch and be able to get things done for you. That's what they're supposed to want to do. We talked about a little bit like that. What are some, my biggest thing, our biggest thought, I was like, man, let's get with J. Raj, let's get with some of these promoters, let's get with some of these guys. Next time y'all have a big concert, beforehand, let's have a 15, 20-minute hour forum and talk about the topic of the day. We're there every week. We already have the pre-party. There's no reason why we can't have a couple of adult beverages around and everybody really having a good time and really talking about what we can do to push our agenda forward as people. Yeah. That was just kind of the thoughts that I had. What are you thinking about that? Or just in overall agenda, what are some things that we can do differently to shift how we talk about politics and how we make politics not something that's taboo, but something that's really ingrained in our culture moving forward?
Yeah, I think that it gets back to, like you said, the relatability piece. One thing that Rodney says, who's the president of our council in East Westwood, is he said, let's not waste moments. Yeah. So I think to your point, when we have these huge concerts with these black promoters, when we have these little league games and have hundreds of parents there, I think that we need to not waste those moments. I think that we need to make sure to have voting registration at every single event, whether it's an election coming up or not. That way we have time to make sure that people's registration is good, make sure that they're registered in the right place. I can't dive deep enough into how many people text me on election day and we realize that their registration is for a house that they lived in 2 years ago. Yeah. So I think that we need to use these huge events, Macy Music Festival, even though we have people from out of town, there's a lot of people from the city that are there. I think we need to make sure that we have voter registration.
Yeah, out of town too. Yeah, they still allies. Yeah. And there was, but no, I'm not the country. Yeah.
But that's facts, and I think that it's important that we do that at these events and even talk to them like if it is election season, what this candidate is, what they represent. Do they see these candidates in the spaces that they're at? Like you said, candidates should be out and be invisible, and I think there are a lot of candidates who have made themselves easily accessible or visible, and those are the people who are really, I think, welcoming change and welcoming the community, because that's always the disconnect. But I think that's the big piece, is we have to not waste these moments, and we have to make the politics a part of the partying.
That's a slogan. Make the politics a part of the partying. Like, shoot, because not only that, as you said before, you mentioned that the politicians are making themselves more accessible. They are coming around, but if politics are part of the partying, then once again, it's almost like Empire when Councilman Tate had his own room and his own little booth.
We're not gonna go that far.
We're not gonna go that far, but the look of having it where your elected officials, your people within the street of street, who everything they might be doing may not be the most legal standard, but they're still a constituent and they're still speaking to a demographic and they still have a voice and a platform. You talked about the coaches. I want to make sure we hit on that piece too, and the Pee Wee side of it, and how that platform is also dealt with. The party promoters. We're having right now, we're also going to talk about this too, a talk that's been going on about the Peoples Choice Awards in Cincinnati. There's so many great entrepreneurs that's going on right now. This under 40 wave of African American BIPOC individuals that are doing things in Cincinnati right now is big and it's huge. We seem united. We seem we're working together. I'm excited about it. The only thing I would like for us to do better is say, what are our points? What do we want? And how do we now formulate a conversation and formulate a cadence of a conversation where it's not just a one-off, but we're consistently talking about how we can push our platform forward, and then once we're done with it, have the time of our lives knowing that we're pushing towards a bigger agenda.
Yeah.
Speaking of platforms, speaking of these coaches, obviously youth football and youth sports has taken a transformation over the past 15, 20 years where some things are good, some things are bad. Like you see a lot more elevated profile of some of these young people, which I think is a great thing. Mm-hmm. You see some coaches that may have been doing some things that may not always been positive, but they were able to use coaching as a way to really transform and change their lives. Mm-hmm. And I'm really talking about some of those coaches that put some of that crap away and came in and really changed their lives by being around these young people. But the most important thing about it is the parents that are there.
Yes.
You have hundreds, if not thousands of kids who were participating between the months of June, because they start Pee Wee early now, mm-hmm. between the months of June, and they're just wrapping it up now, that you could have been talking to and touching base with and getting registered to vote, and allowing these coaches to create a platform and really organize and create together, because as you said before, I don't think they understand how much power they have. Like, you have so many eligible voters, so many parents, but it's not about them voting, but there's so many ideas. They know what they want to see.
It is. Don't say it's not about them voting. It is. I think that.
But I don't want them to be seen as a voter. I want them to be seen as a person in the community who has ideas about what they would like to see be done in the community, because they're the main ones that's coming to the coach and say, hey, I don't like this. Mm-hmm. I don't like that. Why aren't we doing this better? Mm-hmm. Well, why? Because I also need you to volunteer. But B, I can't coach your kid. I can't be the admin person. I can't worry about ref fees. I can't worry about getting your kids to practice. Yeah. I can't worry about our jerseys being clean. I can't worry about spray painting our helmets and worry about safety. You're asking one individual to do that. We gotta make it a whole state policy and really put recreational dollars, tax recreational dollars, towards making our kids not just safer in the environments that they're in, because I'm telling you, game day, for me as a young kid, was the greatest place for a young black boy. Because not only did you get to shine in front of your community, you got to see people who look like you, who were molding you in a way that made sure that, man, if you do get out of line, you might get some push-ups, but you felt like the discipline was by someone who loved you.
Yeah.
But now we're starting to taint that, and it's starting to get contaminated with outside grown issues that should not be anywhere near what these young people are doing. I think we're losing something that's a little bit scary. But D, I'm sorry, I've gone on a little bit.
I was going to say, and I think that that's a societal thing. I think that it's not just in Little League. I think that that's been highlighted here lately. But I think we're losing something as a society in regards to bringing issues into places where it doesn't belong, And so to your point about we should have Little League as an organization funded by the state, I think that that is a good thing. But I do want to get back to the Little League having power. I think that we always talk up to people about your voice is your vote is your voice and your power and stuff. And so I think that there's money out there, whether it's from the city, the state, the county, because there's so many issues with the youth right now. So I think there is money out there. I know there's money out there to help with different things to keep the youth off the street. I think that a lot of times the money is diverted to places where there's voter turnout, where they know there's voters. I think that Little League has so much power and so many people that they are a voting demographic within themselves. I think that if Little League was able to organize all of the parents and coaches into voters and show and prove that, I think they would get so much more money and attention from the local government in regards to how to fund it. So if there's an issue with funding detail, there's money here to give you money for detail. If you need money for uniforms, let's not have the parents always, because not all parents have the time to volunteer.
Nope.
You know what I'm saying?
Nope.
Not all parents are able to fundraise. So I think, like you said, make it a state organization, but then there's going to be rules around it. And I think that there just is a culture in society and with Little League and everything else where we have to start changing the culture where some things are just not allowed and permitted. I do think that it's unfair. I've been reading some of this stuff over the past couple of weeks that have been happening with Little League where people are specifically blaming Little League, and I don't think that is the Little League, specifically OP. I don't think that is their fault, and I think that they're getting a lot of backlash. Are there some things that they can do different? Absolutely, but I think it is not the problem, because I think that it will be crazy to say that these coaches and these parents want this stuff to be happening around their kids. I don't think that's true.
I was trying to go back and I'll continue to keep looking up the overall, the Cincinnati Parks and Recs budget, not just for City of Cincinnati, but for Ohio. But there's millions of dollars there. It's easy to say, it's safe to say it's millions of dollars there. We'll get the exact number here for you for a second. But as you talked about it from an organizational standpoint, I think that might be, I want to say the easiest, maybe say the lowest hanging fruit to start with. Absolutely. Because they're already organized. Like, they're already building organizations. Like, if you already have a foundation where, from two fronts, an organizational leader of your organization, like my dad started the Tri-County Eagles. So you have the top there, then you have each coaches that kind of go underneath you. So you already have that structure there. So now we're talking about really building it from a front of who's going to represent the little league youth organizations that. And I guess the backlash I'm hearing that folks have different egos, and different prides inside. I feel like I can come like this, like Prop Joe from Daggone The Wire right now. Like, I don't know if you've seen The Wire.
I've seen The Wire.
But once again, I feel like we can come to this like Prop Joe. Like, hey, everybody, if we're coming at this correctly, not only can have a little bit of, resources behind it, but the certification behind it, but you got to come correct. If we can make a piece or an association or at least an agreement that we can move forward and say that you guys as coaches, let's come together and say that let's apply some standards and agreements that certified background checks, and with that, let's go get the resource to get you guys paid as well, and let's also make sure that we can get a support staff. Your volunteer parents you just talked about, let's not keep making them volunteers anymore.
Let's pay them, yeah.
Let's make this a real state-funded agency, where now you have these parents here who's also worried about each individual organization. Well, what are my admin? What is our travel schedule? What, like, the stuff that these parents are running to make this stuff work for free is the same crap that our state is failing at sometimes, that they're getting paid over and over and over to do. Yeah. So let's make sure that these parents that are running these organizations feel supported, because they're supporting our babies. Yeah. Like, these are the leadership of the folks that are really going to be taking us forward. Not just team. We ain't even talked about football.
Yeah, and these kids really look up to them, and I think that some of the people really, their hearts are in the right place, and I think a lot of them do a really good job. It's just stuff that is happening, and what I don't like is
can't do it all.
Yeah, they can't do it all, and we talked about this before we went live. Is I don't like how we as a people, and I'll say this, Black people. If something happens at a Little League game, we instantly run to social media and bash all of the people there that are actually helping the kids versus saying, hey, how can I help? Yeah. What can I do? But instead, we hear it for weeks and weeks and weeks. Oh, I know who the shooter was. This is why this happened. This is why this happened. But you haven't reported that, or you haven't did anything to help that, so it's almost like you're condoning it. But I really wish they stopped the bashing and reach out to the Little League and say, how can I help? Where can we help? How do they link? If a person knows Durant's and you have this idea with the state, how do they link Durant's and the Little League? Like, let's start helping each other before we jump on social media and bash each other, because that is one of my biggest pet peeves. Even if it was something that I hated or didn't like, I try not to get on social media. I'll call and have a private conversation, whether it's me venting to somebody else or to somebody who's actually a part of it. But we gotta stop bashing because it makes us look bad.
Well, I think that gets into a whole other issue, just how we deal with our trauma. But I think that could be a whole other episode, just how we deal with our trauma.
Episode 3.
Man. But the side of it and just how you get involved, I don't think we have built a culture where getting involved is normal. Mm-hmm. Like, it's almost like that's always been their job, or that's always been her job, or that's like, we haven't made pathways or normalized where we pull the thumb and say, no, that's my job. Yeah. How can I fill the void? How can I make sure that our babies are safe? Because I don't care. There was obviously a situation that happened today. Yeah. But the details are regardless. How do we make it where something like that isn't even thought about, that we're saying once again? Because, man, there was a USA Today article that I pulled up where we could just go through the country of the number of shootings that have taken place in ballparks around where our kids are just having, once again, trying to play.
So it's not just a local thing. I want people to understand that. It's not just a Cincinnati thing. But I will say this before we move on. is I went to a gun violence prevention seminar a couple weeks ago, and they had Erica Ford out of New York there. She's helped with a lot of the nonviolence in New York. And to your point, what she stated was we have to have people in every aspect. We have to have the people that represent us in politics, in the government. We have to have people that represent us in sports and Little League. We have to have people on the police force. We have to have people in music. Everybody has a role that they can do. Whether you know what your role is or not, I think that's part of you finding yourself and understanding where you help, because everybody can't do everything, to your point. And we do have to be more cohesive in what is your role? What is my role? How do those roles work together? So I would love to see Little League pull that together along with people in the city and the county to kind of help them resolve everything that's been happening lately.
Well, look, as a council member, as whatever title you want to give me, I'm down to help in that cause and do whatever I can do to support that.
Ditto.
To support that, because it's bigger than our kids. It's bigger than football. I think that if you can really build this platform with our parents in Little League, you're really talking about building that platform that we talked about before. What is our standard that we want to see for not just our kids, but for our people? Mm-hmm. Like there should be at least a 3-point code that we can agree to, that we want safer school, we don't want failing schools, and what that mean by we don't want failing schools, it's like, well, if not, these are the demands that we have behind it. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm just throwing out certain things I can think of off the top of my head as a dad. You know, we don't want failing schools. Obviously, we want better roads when you talk about what's in the middle of the
traffic control. I have a 16-year-old that's out driving, and some of the stuff that she calls me panicking because people are honking and screaming at her because she's doing the 35 miles an hour. That's a big issue to me.
And we want access, fair equity access to our taxpayer dollars.
Yep.
I mean, I think those 3 things you can just start with and just kind of just move with and just kind of roll with. I think we could I'm not saying that needs to be our platform, because I'm just talking for one individual. Mm-hmm. But I'm speaking it and bringing it back to our parents in Little League, and we'll kind of move forward again and try to find our People's Choice Awards winners. We probably won't go too much into them, we'll just talk about the importance of it. Yep. Because we're always talking about connectivity and bringing everybody together. We are peaceful people. We want peace here in the zone. But I feel like the platform that you guys have as not just coaches and parents to organize and figure out how you're going to get your kids to each location each week. If we can take that same type of energy and passion and put it towards how we want to make our overall quality of life as a people move forward too, then we cooking with some grease.
Yeah.
But let's get over to another piece about how we are moving forward as a people here in Hamilton County. The Cincinnati Peoples Choice Awards.
I see winners coming through.
Finally. We got our winners coming through. So yeah, we'll announce some of those and give once again good congratulations to those people. But the Cincinnati Peoples Choice Awards. So that was tonight. I believe it started 4:30. Supposed to be used as our excuse. Didn't start on time. We were waiting for it's like Arizona and Raquel Reyes are still waiting for some counting. We were waiting on the awards, that's why we're running late. But no, Cincinnati Choice Awards is the first annual one.
Let me real quick. I don't know if everybody knows that juvenile court, there's 2 black women there. I think it's very important to highlight, but go ahead.
And Miss Stacey last time, I'm trying to when she did last time, wasn't like when she unseated. Oh man, I cannot remember I still remember from 2 years ago when Stacey had the first time. I believe she seated a boy Democrat for her. So it's her seat. And now you have 2 black women against each other, you know. Miss Stacey, her husband, Mr. John, you know, like I said, I know them personally. Like I said, we may not always agree on policy, but as an individual, you know, they're different people, you know, there's some possibility.
I think I heard that.
Stacey's a good person. She's a good person. I'm not saying before on this point. I definitely say, if you can tell from our last episode, I may have endorsed. But like I said, I always agree with Miss Stacey policy, and just to talking policy in general, just how they talk about that race. I'm going off on the People's Choice Award, but this is important.
No, it is.
When you look at Combs Mail and you read, folks are trying to tell you something. Republicans were trying to scare the mess on you, crime issue about what it is. Did you ever go back and ask Republicans, well, what are you going to do differently, or what you've been in place and done differently as a result about it? Because the result is issue 1. If that's your change policy,
that's scary.
We'll just lock y'all up and make y'all throw and pay X amount of dollars to get up through. That's their change policy. So be careful about that. So I'm not saying. But Miss Stacey, your party support Miss Raquel Smith is about.
The kid with 3 names, Raquel Howard Smith. Make sure you say it
right. Do not
disrespect
Howard Smith. It's about community engagement, reform, have some alternative program, not lives over. I said hold it for, but fun. Like this is what changes our lives. Get involved.
It's tricky, but it's fun.
Don't let the People's Choice Awards vote to that vote is going.
I would have loved to see someone down there changing the voter registration. So I say I would promote it, but I would have loved to see us. We're there, and it seemed like he had a lot of promotion and a big crowd. But once again, I really think I would have loved, in the future to see some of these major we had people voters and update their registration because move a lot and not update their registration.
Back to that platform again. We the party platform the party. How are we doing politics? What we say, politics. We'll go back and watch the film. We all together. Party and platform. Politics of partying and partying and politics. Whatever we say, we trademark that. We need to make it where our important one tool, the part they've been manipulated on, is that when we get these things here,